Thanks, Nathan, for such an informative talk. So I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here. So how do you answer back to, let's say, a scientist or someone who's skeptical of these energy mechanisms that you're talking about takes place in a temple? How do we answer back to those guys?
I think I will simply say that they do not have a capability or the faculties to decide upon things which are beyond the physical. So I think they do not even have a locus standi to speak about it. See, I spoke about the panchakoshas, stula, sukshma shariras, the pranamaya, annamaya kosha. What does science even today, certain aspects, certain branches of science, even today think that brain, the mind is rooted in the brain. So unless and until they grow up over it, so I think they don't have a locus standi. It's simply about the pramana, valid means of knowledge. Science is valid in the physical universe, in the physical laws accepted, but they do not have a deeper understanding on some things because they rely on deeply laboratory methods. Their methodologies are purely physical. So using a physical mechanisms, you cannot understand something non-physical. So we in our tradition, the pramana is a very important aspect in the Hindu tradition for all things. Pramana means valid means of knowledge. So we have our own valid means of knowledge. We have derived our own valid means of knowledge by various things. So this science, I think it is a very fallacy today's time that we think science as the only pramana or the only valid means of knowledge, and whatever it says is completely true and everything is false. That is also faulty because even science itself keeps changing with times, and new discoveries happen. They change their stance, they change their hypothesis, right?
You spoke about pramana. I think one of the things which can be verified or validated is that, as you said, the Vedas say that menstruation should be a painless process, right? So if
Ayurveda says, yeah.
the Ayurveda, yeah. So if a woman practices all the do's and don'ts for a period of time, will she be able to attain a painless process of menstruation?
Incidentally, there is at least one study. I have searched a lot, but there is one study I can give a reference to, wherein a group of, I think, 30 women, non-married women in their, I think, young women, were subjected to 6 months, 6 cycles of menstruation observation. They noted 13 criteria of the issues they had before starting this Rajaswala Paricharya, including pain in the calf muscles, the pain in the lower abdomen, pimples, and many other. There's a list. You can see my articles for the details of the study. And they found that at the end of, I think I have details here itself. Let me read it out to you. Rajaswala Paricharya, Effect on Menstrual Cycle and its Associated Symptoms, published by IOSR Journal, Dental and Medical Sciences, February 2015, by Dr. Pallavi Pai, Dr. Sarita Buchuda, and Dr. Prasad Patkar. It's in my articles, you can search online. So they studied 30 unmarried females between 18 years and 24 years. They were asked to practice Rajaswala Paricharya during their 3 days of their menstruation for over 6 consecutive cycles, and the effects of the practice on the menstrual symptoms experienced by them was noted, and appropriate statistics tests were carried out. So the 13 symptoms that they took into consideration was pain in the lower abdomen, lower backache, pimples, breast tenderness, cramps in calf muscles, loss of appetite, hot flushes, nausea and vomiting, constipation, increased bowel movements, increased frequency of micturition, weakness, headache, migraine, irritability, depression, etc. So what they found at the end is, each subject, that is each of the 30 people, each subject in the study experienced drastic reductions in the number of symptoms they were afflicted with. Drastic reductions. The number of symptoms experienced by a single person before beginning the study ranged from 4 to 9. At the end of the study, the maximum number of symptoms experienced by single subject stood at 4. But the key here is, this 4 was experienced by only 2 of the 30 people. All others, at least 11 of the 30 females reported 0 symptoms at the end of their Rajaswala Paricharya practice for 6 months. 9 students reported experiencing only one symptom, and only 4 students said they experienced 2 or 3 symptoms. So, out of 13 symptoms, at the end of the 6 months, 11 people said they experienced 0 symptoms at the end of the study. Before, they experienced maybe 4, 5, 6 or 7 symptoms, but it became 0 at the end of 6 months. Also, another key here, the compliance to various tenets of Paricharya among these women increased from an average of 76.1% to 86.66% over the 6 months. I mean, there was no other push, external push, that they have to increase their compliance, but these females started to comply more and more on their own. Why? Because there was perceivable improvement in their cycle, or how the cycle happened to them. So, I think at least in one study there is what I said, the normal menstruation, women were able to experience it at the end of 6 months of practice.
Yeah. Also, I was just, I was listening to your talk and I got a little curious about how, you spoke about how it was celebrated, right? Like menstruation is a celebration. But if you see our households today, it's something that is not often talked about. Like you don't discuss this in your family and stuff. So where do you think that comes from? Is it a result of colonialism or something else? Like where do you think that comes from?
I don't know, I think so. See, this taboo, not talking, there are a lot of taboos whose roots are in, I feel they are in Abrahamic traditions, the Christianity, etc. I think Sankrant Sanu has a very good article on this. So on misogyny, Christianity, etc. So these taboos were brought in to India during colonial times. I feel so, because if you see the Dharma Shastras or the Smritis, there is an open discussion on menstruation. This is called Stri Dharma, because of course Stri Dharma is not limited to menstruation, but it is the menstruation is also called as Stri Dharma because it is something which is unique to women. Men don't have that privilege. We have to suffer by doing Sandhya Vandana and all those procedures, but women have natural means of purification. So I quoted some Baudhayana Dharma Sutra, etc. to show that there is an open discussion, not just in medical texts, but even the Shrutis, the Smritis, everywhere. Contrary to that, in our own homes, we don't speak. I don't know how, I have not done a study of how it evolved, but I think we can safely say, just like the topic of sex, the taboo, it's all rooted in Victorian mentality of the sex as a taboo. Sex as something, not to be talked. It's something to be considered bad, something considered impure. But on the other hand, we don't consider sex impure. We recognize it as a legitimate purushartha. Purushartha means the goals of life. The kama, the desires, including sexual ones, is a legitimate purushartha, and we take it further. We consider it also as a sacred activity. The spiritual activity, if utilized, can and will lead to samadhi. I can quote from n number of texts like Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Lord Shiva gives 112 kind of meditations. I think 4 of them is sexual meditation. In the context of menstruation itself, we have this concept of Yoni Puja in Tantric traditions. Yoni is vagina. The Yoni Puja is the worship of the women along with her sexual organ, and it says only that Yoni must be worshipped which has started menstruating. Without menstruation, that Yoni should not be and could not be worshipped. So there is a lot of openness. I think today's our understanding, the society somewhere down the line, there have been skewed. There is some distortion is there.
I've actually seen that. I forget the name.
It's an image of Lajja Gauri. So this Lajja Gauri, I was not even aware of this form. While researching just few days for a proper picture for this presentation, I happened to stumble upon it.
This is lying in the Badami Museum. I've seen it.
Fantastic, and that is such a beautiful form. She is the goddess of fertility, and by extension, she is the goddess of menstruation. Our Hindu tradition has been a highly, feministic, not the feminist in the sense, feminine, I think it's a more better word. It takes into account both the Shiva and Shakti aspect, what they today call as yin and yang. So it's a highly, ground based tradition. It takes into account everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I was just wondering, from taking on from the question there, since this is viewed very regressively, both in academia and also in at homes. So the one difference that the liberating movement that you talk about in the US or some other country, where staying away becomes liberation, here it's not. I think it's grounded in the idea of choice. So if that practice is grounded in the idea of choice, and you make this as part of kind of education at home, and then make it more choice based, wouldn't that be a good way to inculcate kind of awareness about it?
Of course. See, choice is ingrained in Hindu tradition. Of course, we may not be practicing. See, let me hear me out.
Yeah,
Hear
that's
me
the
out.
problem.
Yeah, hear me out. Choice is ingrained in Hindu tradition. Choice based on knowledge is ingrained in Hindu tradition. So that must be qualified. The whole purpose of presentation is to provide knowledge so that each woman can decide for themselves. The entire purpose of Dharma Shastras as a whole is to provide knowledge. I will give an example of how the choice is there. There is a book I was reading, Rambles of Ramayana. This is in a different context by Sri Gyanananda Saraswati. So he gives the role of Dharma Shastra. He says, just as a friend advises you, see, this is a benefit, this is good for you, this is bad for you, and why this is good for you, why this is bad for you, what are the pros, what are the cons, and then you yourself make your decision. Just like that, you have the Dharma Shastras, which says these are the ideal things, these are the good practices, this gives this good results. On the other hand, these are the adharmic practices, this gives you this bad results. Now it is for you to decide what you want to do. The very concept of dharma and adharma, it is rooted ultimately at the individual level, rooted in the choice. What I will also substantiate with a quote from Manusmriti, which says that there are 4 pramanas for dharma. There are 4 levels actually. The first is the Shruti, the second is the Smriti, etc. The third is Sadachara, the actions of the great people like Gurus, Acharyas, Rama, Krishna, etc. The final is Atma Tripti, self-satisfaction. So who is the self? We individuals, we have to understand and decide what is good for us. Everything before that Atma Tripti is for a guideline. It's a guideline. It's for our guidance. It shows what is beneficial, what is non-beneficial. The karma is that you do a karma, you get an action. After doing karma, there is no way to saying I will not go through the fruits, I will do only karma. No, right? So these are the guidelines. So there is always a choice. These texts were written to give right knowledge, ultimately guiding people to do what they want. Of course, the way deep down, due to many internal and external factors, I could name Islamic invasion, I could name colonialism, but that will divert the topic. I do not want to blame anybody here, but that is a fact. There are certain external influences, there were certain internal reactions to that influences. There are multiple number of factors which we cannot simply say this exactly caused this, what we have today. Of course, today the condition is bad. People simply don't know. When they don't know something, they say practice it. This is something we have received from ancestors. Because they themselves are ignorant of it. Why? The question why. That is why I started with the question why. Because that understanding is very important. Mechanically practicing is meaningless. Yeah.
From what I know and from what I've learned in school and otherwise is that the concept of a working woman was not unknown in India in the ancient times. Women used to work, take on administrative roles and everything else. So is there some practice, some written text in Hinduism which provides some sort of relief or some sort of measures which help a woman to continue with her professional activities during menstruation, or some sort of remedy for that?
I think you're approaching it from a wrong aspect. Let us say some text will write, women working is very important, so let them go and work during menstruation, nothing will happen to them. Will that mean that women who work, women who exert physically themselves, it will not create imbalance of doshas? Simply writing down something in a text will not change the biological, the happening inside your body. So the question is wrong, because that it makes no sense for writing something which does not reflect a physical reality. So what we can do, what I think, I think in our ancient tradition they were very understanding of the different natures of men and women, and the whole concept was based on the fact that each individual must attain their own self-actualization by working, by doing things, by following their inner calling according to their swabhava. So women were, the society was like such that women used to take rest during menstruation. I think that can be even done today. See, women can take a 2 days rest during menstruation and instead work on 2 Saturdays or 2 Sundays. Something like that is possible. We are not doing that because we have inherited this, that so-called menstruation is a natural activity, does not take a rest, does not need rest. This is a modern imposition from the modern absorption from the West. Why don't we do it? There will be no harm to the career also of the women also, because they are compensating for the 2 days leave on the menstruation by working on 2 other days, right? Yeah.
I really liked your talk, and I especially liked the parallel that you drew between practices of the Rajaswara Paricharya and Sandhya Vandana, which is performed by men. So while menstruation is a natural phenomenon, women have no control over it. They are getting purified whether they want it or not. Sandhya Vandana is not a natural phenomenon. Why is there no talk of the importance of Sandhya Vandana? Why when do we have a talk on that? When men are they are requested, or they are asked to perform Sandhya Vandana, and because they need to be purified also in a world where women are being mistreated, by men, primarily. So
the whole concept of the brahmacharya avastha, the studenthood, you may say it is in the trivarna avastha, the only for the dvijas and etc. Of course, the Vaidika aspect is for dvijas, but everybody had their own kind of brahmacharya. There is something called samanya dharma, the basic duties like ahimsa, asteya, indriya nigra. Indriya nigra is control of senses. Why is control of senses is taught? To prevent all this rape, sexual assault, etc., etc., right? This Sandhya Vandana, yes, it is very important. Though the people have a misconception that this is only limited to dvijas. Yes, the Vaidika Sandhya Vandana is limited to dvijas. There is a sound reason, but this is not the place to speak about it. But there is a Tantrika Sandhya Vandana, the Mahanirvana Tantra, the Shiva himself reveals it at the beginning of Kali Yuga, saying this is for whole Kali Yuga. All must do, all the 4 varnas, everybody should do this. This knowledge is missing. Who is speaking about Tantrika Sandhya Vandana? I don't see, except few tantric practices. This is for everybody, right? So why is that not there? Because our traditional education system was wiped out, simply removed. You read Dharmapal, you will see at the eve of colonial British invasion, we had huge indigenous schools. You should read also the Sahana Singh's latest book on education, heritage, how our universities were flourished in pre-Islamic, pre-colonial India, and how the Islamic rule first removed the universities, and then the colonial education removed even the Gurukulas and other traditions that survived the Islamic onslaught. So the reason of the why is that whole root and stem was removed, and we were able to save something, some small things. They are not small, they are very big, that's a different thing. But many things were lost. So yes, Sandhya Vandana is a very important, not just Sandhya Vandana, it's not just about Sandhya Vandana also. There are other ways. Some spiritual activity is need of the hour, but today people, great pride in atheism. See, I do not hold grudge against atheists because I was an atheist in my high school. Yes, I regret now that I lost lot precious years, but I don't regret fully because today what I am, it is because I was an atheist then, I could appreciate each and every single small thing in a Sanatana Dharma, every single small thing that is with pramanas, not anything that we call Sanatana Dharma today anyways. So, I could appreciate it because I remember that at one time I rejected it. I one time thought it is a superstition. I one time thought, what is this nonsense? Today I know what I consider as nonsense. The consideration itself was a nonsense. So, the thing is, this is all important. I hope someday to write a book on Sandhya Vandana also, but that is a different issue.
Sadhguru himself has said that the men need to do Sandhya far more than the women. That's actually said over there.
क्या पुरुषों के भी कुछ दायित्व निर्धारित किए गए हैं मासिक धर्म के दौरान?
हाँ, पुरुषों का सबसे बड़ा दायित्व ये है कि वो अपने वाइफ के पास जाके not to seduce her. I am not speaking out of the hat, okay? I am not speaking out of the hat. Of course, not in the same words, but there is a verse in the Manusmriti which says, again, a verse which is considered as misogynist, but it is not misogynist. What it says, I don't exactly remember the wordings, but what it says is, men who go and have sexual intercourse with menstruating women will lose their energy and will lose their mind. So Manu is typical in his way of saying, because he is a rishi, he knows what is good for people. This is not misogynist. What he simply says is, it is a responsibility of the men folk to facilitate women to practice Rajaswala Paricharya by helping her. How will she be able to practice sexual abstinence if we go and keep on touching her? If we go and keep on saying her, hey, come and cook me, I am hungry. So I sometimes do that with my wife because today we live in such a time that everything may not be possible. But I remember Gita which says even little bit of dharma gives great fruit. So men have a bigger responsibility because without men's helping, because what is a grihastha ashrama? Grihastha, the householder life, what is the basis of it? Men and women are not two sides of the coin. They are half, Ardhanareshwara, half. The left half is women, the right half is men, right? So they are together. Our tradition does not speak of men and women as separate. They speak of them together. They together do everything. They together, enter the nuptial ties. They together create new life, make the new life grow, give them educate. They together educate. It's not just men who educate. Women educate children. She is the first teacher, right? And they together practice Grihastha Ashrama Dharma, a part of which is this Stri Dharma, the Rajaswala Dharma also.
Thank you for that talk. It was very informative. I'm very ignorant about some of the things here, but like you said, Manusmriti has been written by Rishi Manu, a man. What I find very intriguing is all these texts that you quote, to my knowledge, which is limited, were all written by men. So an experience which is so unique to women, how involved were women in making these rules which still continue to define their lives?
I think the question could be equally asked of me, why a man is standing here and speaking, right? Right. Ideally, women, I always tell them, whoever ask me, yes, women should have come and stood. Why did they not do? This is not the first time. There are so many times, why did they not do? I don't know. I had a calling, I did. But on a serious note, in the Puranas, not related to menstruation, but related to Dharma Shastra, I will say, there is a mention of a lady called Madalasa. There is a Madalasa Upakhyana in one or two Puranas. She is a fantastic woman. She is a Jnani, even when she is married. And She is the one who imparted all the dharma shastras, all the duties of a householder, duties of a sannyasi, everything to all the three of her sons. Her teaching started when the baby was born with a lullaby. This Madalasa Upakhyan, the lullaby is very famous because the whole teaching is about moksha and Advaita. Just imagine the baby growing up hearing to that Aham Brahmasmi or something like that. The first two sons took sannyas at the age of 8 and 6 or something like that. They became sannyas. She was a queen. She was a queen, and the two sons became sannyas at the age of 6 or 8 something. The husband said, please don't make my third or fourth son also a sannyasi. Please, please, please. This sannyasa is called as nivritti dharma. On the other hand, the other aspect, householder is called as, grihastha is called as pravritti dharma. He requests her to teach them pravritti dharma, and she teaches them about varana, ashrama and everything that comes in between. Secondly, in a Ritukala samskara, men has very little participation. Men have only passive role. As I said, the role of Ritukala samskara was also to welcome the women into womanhood, the children, girls into womanhood, and tell them their duties, tell them about menstrual practices. Who did that? Women. Just because a rishi wrote a smriti does not mean that there is some no women agency. I think the gist of the question is the agency. So I gave an example of Madalasa to show that women used to teach. There is an example in our friend that our mothers, the mothers talk to daughters. I think this is somewhere rooted in today's taboo that dads or men folk don't too much talk. They are very shy about menstruation because it is the women ladies who speak. So this is another evidence, though in a reverse way, though in a slightly trivial way, that it was transformed from women to women. Related to the aspect of the smritis, see, we need to understand something. How these smritis were revealed? Everything starts with some people approaching a particular rishi with a question, that saying that, please help us to understand the dharmas of everybody for the Loka Kalyana, let us understand. There is an inquiry and there is an answer. That does not mean all such inquiries were recorded, right? So, just because something has been, that is a fact. I agree that men have been mostly the Smriti authors. But does it mean it is even any less authentic? I take my example. Yes, I am not a girl, I am not a woman, I do not undergo menstruation. I don't know actually how you feel. But I am not speaking about here how you feel, right? What I am speaking about here is the concept of ashaucha, the concept of vata pitta dosha. This is simply, the gender question does not arise in speaking about this. Why? Cannot men become gynecologists? Cannot men treat women? Do you say men doctor, if a male doctor, how can you treat me? You do not know about me. You are not a woman. You don't have my biological process. You don't say that. Then why do we say it in this process? Why we spoke about Rishi? Because Rishis are their purpose, they are drashtas. They could see the past, the present and the future. They had no personal agenda. They had nothing to gain from that. So, to understand our Shastras, we have to place ourselves in that tradition. Simply saying, Manusmriti something wrote, somebody wrote, some king wrote, and then there was interpolations. This will never help you to get to the root of the issue, because they have transmitted in a way for a particular reason. Mahabharata has been transmitted in a way for a particular reason. So, just because there is another reason I may also say, women had completely different role. Like I said, Madalasa, she taught her children the Dharma Shastras. She did not write a Smriti. Nobody stopped her from writing a Smriti. Her husband was entirely supportive of her, and in fact he admired her immensely. So, but why did she not write? Maybe she did not feel the inclination to write. Can we for once think that women in the tradition, they might not have written a Smriti because they might not have had an inclination to write?
Or maybe they did not know how to write because, I mean, it's not
No, it's not about writing.
What literacy and who was able
No,
to
but
use
so see,
text and
in our tradition, oral is more important than writing because word is a Shakti, word is a power. Written never has that effect. But writing, when men were used to learn, women also used to learn. Even Kama Sutra, say I quote various traditions. In Kama Sutra, among the activity that a women must learn, 64 arts, mathematics, writing, etc. are mentioned. So the thing is, when such a thing is already mentioned, they were given immense freedom to do what they liked. The thing is, why it's a very difficult to answer. We can only conjecture, we can only guess why they did not do it. I hope more women will do it. I know few women who are dharmically oriented who agree with me, but they are not doing this lecture today. Am I to blame that I am doing this lecture today? If anything, I am not blaming women for not doing it, because in Hindu tradition, the agency is not the matter. Even Trayambaka Yajvan, who wrote a Stri Dharma Paddhati in 18th century, again a man, he invokes goddess Parvati and he says, this is not my doing. I am merely a conveyor of a message from goddess Parvati. Just before coming here, I was reading this. He says, this is not written by me. I am not the agency. He is removing his own agency. When men remove their own agency, that is why we never thought about agency, about men and I have to do this. This is a copyrighted patent or something.
Yeah. Just from copyright to patents, and this is the same thing I was thinking. What is going to happen, perhaps, if we have some studies done in this area, and you realize the health benefits of following these age-old traditions, then perhaps what is going to happen is like what is happening to yoga in the West today. So where it gets digested as a form of a secular practice, and then the other kind of elements that are seen holistically in the context of the ecosystem, the Vedic ecosystem, might be completely lost. So how do you then have this undertake this challenge of actually practicing it as from a holistic point of view rather than digesting it, and then
See, the solution is very simple. Who is digesting? The West is digesting.
So even the East is digesting. I
Let
have
me
many colleagues
complete.
who practice yoga, but don't want to chant.
Yes,
more.
let me complete. See, the West is digesting and imported it back to India, and we are taking it up. So fault somewhere lies with us that we have forsaken our own practices. So solution is simple. You start practicing. You start living a holistic life. Transmit to your children, transmit to your students, transmit to your others. You practice and then teach. Adhyayana, Acharana, Adhyapana. Adhyayana is study, Acharana is practice, Adhyapana is teaching. This is the three pillars in Hindu tradition about any vidya, any form of knowledge. This three thing is important. Today's what we do, you by heard something in a book, we teach. There is no practice. So if there is no practice, then when you preach, it has no Shakti, it has no power, it has no influence. What Vivekananda said 100 years ago is today still working, it's still having its influence on a number of people, thousands of people. But what some other person, what Mayo or someone who wrote that book on India or something, nobody knows, nobody read. See, I don't even remember that person's name. Gandhi called her book Gutter Inspector's Account of India or something. Nobody knows who is she, but we know Vivekananda. So that is the effect of his Adhyayana, Acharana and then Adhyapana. The Adhyapana has an effect because there was Acharana. I am digressing. The point is, we can start it at home. See, what is the whole purpose of this? To influence at least one of you, to implement something, 1, 2, 3. Maybe 1 month you do one thing and next month you do 0 and next another month you do 4. Even a single account, single activity of dharma frees you from fear, frees you, helps you, benefits you. So there is no shortcut other than practicing it. Understanding it, practicing it, and teaching it, spreading it to the competent people. Again, another criteria.